Evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us at our April 14th Committee of the Whole Special Action Agenda. I hope everyone is staying healthy and safe. Please join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to turn it over to Mrs. Sugars for roll call, please. Mrs. Arroyo?
Here.
Mrs. Friedel?
Here.
Mr. Goodwin?
Here.
Mrs. Matlack?
Here.
Mrs. Neary?
Here.
Mr. Avadia? Mrs. Schultz?
Here.
Mrs. Tong?
Here.
Mrs. Seidel? Here. Okay, we do not have any presentations or board recognition tonight. Does anybody have any correspondence? And like last meeting, I'm just going to go through and randomly ask people. So we'll start with Eric. Mr. Goodwin.
No, I have none.
Mrs. Matlack.
I have none.
Mrs. Schultz.
I have none.
Mrs. Tong.
None for me.
Mr. Avadia. Mrs. Friedel.
None, but I am on board docs.
Okay, great. Mrs. Arroyo
None, thank you.
and Mrs. Neary.
None for me, thank you.
Okay. All right, so that means we will move into our first public comment of the evening. And this evening, it's going to be done a little differently. We had notified folks that they could email Ms. Sugars for with their comments. And this first public comment section is for anything that's on the agenda. We will have another public comment period that is for any topic. And again, I'll give, for those of you out there watching, I'll give the email address. It's lshugars@chclc.org. And that is the email address you can email your comment to. And now I'll turn it over to Mr. Sugars to read the comments.
I just want to say Mr. Avadia just joined the meeting.
Yes, I apologize. I do have correspondence. Is it okay to go back?
Oh, absolutely.
I'm sorry. My apologies for the virtual snafu.
No
On
problem.
April 1st, I did attend the Camden County Educational Services Commission meeting that was held virtually. And I did want to report two things. One was that there was significant concern within the commission that school districts basically comply with, honor their obligations to the Educational Services Commission. And at the time of the meeting, we were the only district to have indicated that we would meet our contractual obligations with the commission. And so for that, we got the thanks. Specifically, our Board of Ed locally, Dr. Malash and Lynn Sugars. And so I just want to note the commission's thanks to us for being at the forefront of that. Also a note from them as we went back to our respective districts, encouraging us in the strongest terms to pass a local resolution against delay, against the idea that local taxes would be withheld from school districts based on state legislation. So these are thinking about quarterly tax payments, noting that this, such a thing would make the local responsibilities very difficult to honor, and so a very bad thing for the system. So it's on our agenda tonight per their strong recommendation to pass. It followed NJSBA also making that recommendation, so they wanted me to pass that along, and that is what I have to report.
Thank you, Mr. Avadia. Okay, now we'll jump back to Mrs. Sugars for the public comments for items on the agenda.
So I have two, it looks like. The first one is from Dr. Jeff Potowitz concerning item 20.1, which is the resolution that Mr. Vadi was just speaking about. Dr. Potowitz says, I would ask the administration and board members to leave out, whereas local property tax constitutes 82% of Cherry Hill Public Schools district revenue. Approximately 10 years ago, an already under-aided Cherry Hill School District had its direct state aid cut over 50%. There was an economic crisis, and Governor Christie and the legislature felt that the calculations they used were the fairest way to cut state aid. The logic then was, in effect, that we in Cherry Hill, because more of our budget was paid locally, could afford the greater percentage cuts in direct state aid. The fact that we were not receiving our fair share of property tax relief was not relevant. We are in a much more significant crisis now, medically and economically. State aid to education calculated formula aid figures will most likely be changed. Please at least leave that section out. That's from Dr. Potowitz. And then I have another comment related to the budgets on the work session agenda. With the newly updated fiscal year calendar for the state, what does that mean for our district? In addition, from listening to the governor's address today, it appears he will be presenting a brand new budget to the legislature in August. Where does this leave our district since our school year starts in September and is based on a July 1 funding cycle? And that was from Yanni Yaris, who lives at 329 Cherry Hill Boulevard.
Okay, thank you. Next, we will move into our committee of the whole, and I'll turn it over to Mrs. Matlack for curriculum and instruction.
Thank you very much. And I believe I'll be turning it over to Dr. Mahan and Ms. McCartney to talk about the summer reading.
Yes, so thank you, Mrs. Matlack. We wanted to circle back with the committee to discuss summer reading. We had asked the committee to read some text in the March cycle, which you came back with and gave us feedback on those. And we just wanted to follow up again. Ms. McCartney is going to chime in with some additional updates to summer reading, and then we'll have an opportunity for questions. So Ms. McCartney.
Hold on. Mrs. McCartney, hold on just a second. Let me just get you unmuted.
Not mute, okay.
There you go.
Hi, sorry about that. In March, we looked at some drafts for the summer reading. As we discussed, there are no changes for high school. The high school went pretty smoothly last year, so we're going to keep the same assignment and we're going to keep the same selection of books. The middle school drafts were depending on whether or not the books were approved. So there were two books that were given out in March to read, and I apologize, I can't remember who read them, but one of them was The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill, and the other was Undefeated, Jim Thorpe and the Carlisle Indian School Football Team by Steve Schenken. Is there any feedback on these two texts?
Yes, I read the Jim Thorpe one, and I enjoyed the story, and I think that although it may appeal to kids initially if they like football, I think it will appeal to a broader range of readers once they start reading it, because it wasn't just about that. There were a lot of other themes in there, and a lot more history as well that I think will appeal. And one thing I really did like about it was that although it's a nonfiction book, it read more like a fiction text. Mm-hmm. And I think that will appeal to the kids as well.
Okay, great. And The Girl Who Drank the Moon?
I have not finished my homework yet, Miss McCartney. I'm very sorry.
Okay.
The book was in my office, which I wasn't allowed to go to for a short period of time to get. So I'm a little behind, and I promise I'll get you some feedback.
Okay. Are there any other questions regarding the drafts or any of the titles or assignments?
I have none.
Okay, I will go around the room just to see if anybody has any questions about the summer reading. And if not, that's our only item on CNI tonight, correct? So then we can move on to the next section. Okay, so Mrs. Neary, any questions?
No, thank you.
Mrs. Arroyo,
No questions.
Ms. Friedel,
No questions. Thank you.
Mr. Avadia,
No questions, thanks.
Ms. Tong,
Yeah, is everybody supposed to get a copy of it, or are we supposed to look it up somewhere to get that information? I don't know what the name of the two books that we just mentioned, the summer reading book.
so the summer reading books were discussed during the last CNI meeting and then read out at the work session. And then the committee members, the CNI committee members volunteered to read the books. That's typically how we handle it, but we can make sure that you have the name of all of the summer reading titles.
Okay, thank you.
You can also refer back to the notes from the last CNI agenda.
Okay, thank you, Lisa.
Sure.
I have no questions except that. Thanks.
Mrs. Schultz,
No questions. Thank you.
Mr. Goodwin,
No questions. Thank you.
and then Mrs. Matlack already confirmed that she did not have any. So with that, we'll move on to business and facilities, and I'll turn it over to Mrs. Schultz.
Thank you, Lisa. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Mrs. Sugars. I believe she's going to be walking us through some of the, I guess, the explanation in regards to the wall project at the high schools.
Yeah, we have a quick, we're going to try to do a very quick project update for you tonight.
You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Great.
Hopefully we can.
Okay.
So we're going to cover some of the projects that are underway and wrapping up right now. So you can go ahead to the next slide. And I'm going to ask Mr. Bart to jump in where he needs to here. So the first project that we're looking at is the high school east parapet wall project. And you can see the wall just as it was beginning and then sort of in progress there. You can see the top where parapet was, the cement actually replaced with a metal siding at the top of the building. To the next one. You can see this in progress. This is the work in progress on the left, and on the right you can see the finished product. You've had a chance to drive by there. It really looks very nice. It's very well done. They're just wrapping up that project. They need to do some work on the lawn in front of the building, which had a lot of damage to it through the course of the project, but that project is just about wrapped up right now. We move on to our vestibules. As you know, we're installing vestibules at both east and west, and with that came the replacement of the front doors at the main entrance at east, and this is just two pictures. The doors really look phenomenal, and actually I think we painted those columns as well. So the front entrance looks very well. And then if we go inside, you can see at east, because of the size of the lobby, we actually used kind of a storefront. And you can see kind of both angles there. The angle on the left is if you're coming through the front door into the vestibule, and the picture on the right is if you're standing on the other side of the lobby, kind of looking at the vestibule. Again, they look great. Hopefully we'll have a chance to see them at some point, but they're coming along nicely. We had learned last week that construction was going to be shut down, but fortunately for us, school construction is an exemption. So we're just finishing up these two vestibules, and hopefully we'll be able to finish them up in the next couple weeks. Next slide. And this is the west vestibule. The west vestibule, this is a picture on the left from the inside. And on the right, that's actually in the little office area that looks into the vestibule where the sliding window is. This project's coming along very well too. We're coming down the home stretch with both of those areas. The vestibule at West is huge. It's kind of shocking if you've been in West before. We came in the front entrance area. Between removing the second set of doors and removing the trophy cases, it's going to be a very nice sized vestibule that we're going to have there. And I've been talking to some of the staff. I was talking to Officer Valseri yesterday, and they're very excited about it. So we're excited about it too. This is what it'll look like going into the hallway there at the main entrance. The front of it, we don't have a picture of, but there's a nice canopy that'll cover the front, and there's a ramp there now, so it'll be handicapped accessible. So next, we're going to look at one of the projects that we did this year was stage accessibility. This is at Cooper. We built Cooper and Hart. We built ramps, and at Beck and Stockton we did lifts. So at Cooper, this is some pictures of the ramp that was built that gives that stage accessibility there at Cooper Elementary. And this is what it looks like at Hart. Kind of comes in the side and back around to the back of the stage. This is Stockton. This is a lift that we had put in to the side of the stage there. Just because of the area that we had to work with, there really wasn't room for a ramp. So we had to move some HVAC equipment to install this, but this is the lift that was installed at Stockton. And then at Beck, this is the lift that was installed there. So those were the four areas in the district where we knew they were not getting additional APRs. We had some areas that were through the last bond referendum, and so we had focused on those four areas, and that project is done, and so we're very happy to have that work done. We moved on to some fencing work. We did fencing throughout the district, and I would say the most significant area is at Cooper. We have kind of the black fence going along the side there. We also had some concrete work there done so that you can come down into the street there. That's a crossing area there for the students, and a ramp area there that leads back up to the school. So now when we have children coming and going during the course of the day, we do if we have to evacuate the building for any particular reason, it's all new concrete, new fencing. It really looks nice. I get to drive by it on my way to work, and I'm really impressed with how it looks. This is some fencing we did at Beck, and then also at East. I believe this is the girls' softball field.
It is.
We did a new backstop there. So, and this is at Richterman. We put in some new gates over at Richterman. So we still have lots of fencing left to do throughout the district, but through this project, we got to accomplish a lot. And then we had some striping at Woodcrest that we did. This was handicap striping that we needed to do to our event entrance and our main entrance. And so we had that work done in the late winter. We were able to get that out and get that work done. So now everything is to code, and that work is done there at Woodcrest. We did some door replacement work throughout the district. I believe this is Knight. I think at this point have replaced almost all of the exterior doors that really needed to be replaced. I think there's maybe a handful left that need to be done. So this was at Knight. That's Mann on the left and the library annex at East on the right. We got new doors there. Status of our other projects. So tonight on our agenda, we have a change order to do some additional work with the East Wall project. As you'll see that we are done the parapet wall project. We did not use the allowance in that project, so we're going to release that allowance and we're going to apply it to the East Wall project so that we can do another section of that work. We were able, while school was closed, to do an asbestos abatement project. That was a project we had planned to do over spring break. We were able to get that work done so that we are ready when our contractor can come in. We're ready to move through that process and get that job up and running. Right now, we're working through the permit process to get that work up and going. Our ADA accessibility project, we had talked last year about assessing the district for ADA accessibility. We're working with environmental resolutions. They are finalizing their reports, which we hope to have shortly. And then we will take those reports and prioritize our project and kind of coordinate with bond referendum planning. We know that we have a lot of asphalt and a lot of concrete throughout the district that needs to be worked on, and it may not make sense to work on some of those pieces in and of themselves. It may make more sense from a financial standpoint to work on those pieces as part of a bigger bond referendum. I know Dr. Malash likes to joke that we could do an entire referendum just on asphalt, and that's true. We have a lot of bad asphalt and curbing throughout the district. So wanting to use our funds wisely, we want to make sure that we prioritize anything that is currently a deterrent from people getting into the building, we would address right away, and then try to prioritize the rest of the projects and work through the bond referendum process to get those projects completed. And the last project that we have, as you're aware, we needed to be compliant with Alyssa's law. Alyssa's law required that all districts have a silent panic alarm installed. That's another project that we were able to do over the closure. So we have had those installed. And once the process for reimbursement from the state is finalized, that was supposed to be finalized. Obviously, that's been put on hold right now. We will be able to get reimbursement for this project and then use the additional funds for other security projects. So we had to get this done in order to be eligible to use those funds for other projects. So we're very happy to get this work done while the district is closed. And that's it. I know that was a lot of information. Just opening it up for questions if anyone has any questions.
I will go around the room again.
Hang on just a second.
Oh, 1 second.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Avadia, any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Ms. Friedel?
No questions, but I'm really happy to see that the silent alarms were put in.
Great, thank you. Mrs. Arroyo?
No, great work. Thank you.
Mrs. Neary?
No questions, thank you.
Mrs. Tong?
No questions, thank you.
Mrs. Schultz?
No questions. Thank you.
Mrs. Matlack?
No questions, thank you.
And Mr. Goodwin?
Just one question regarding, given the fact that it looks like our school, at least from what I've heard from the governor, it looks like our schools are probably going to be closed through the end of the school year. Does that allow us to do any additional work? If that is indeed true, will that can we plan for or do any additional work while the schools are closed? Kind of make good use of this time.
We really don't have, we can once our next year's budget is approved. A lot of the projects that we plan to do are in next year's budget, but we're running up against some issues in terms of, you know, can contractors staff and can we get furniture and materials? We had talked about for next year rehabbing Mann Elementary School and the one section of Kingston Elementary School. Now very concerned about whether or not we're going to be able to do that work because we don't know if we're going to be able to get the furniture in time to do that work. So we're taking a look at all of our projects right now. You know, once we get the budget finalized at the end of April, then we'll kind of develop a plan and see, you know, what we think is doable, what isn't doable. We also know that if we have any issues with funding, that projects will probably most likely be the first thing that will be cut. So we need to be careful about overcommitting at this point until we know for sure what our budget looks like, what our state aid looks like from the state.
Oh, that brings up another point. So we won't know until August, is what I think I understood you to say, whether or not we're going to have the full budget or full state funding that was promised, or if it will be something less than that.
Well, all I can tell you is that today our budget was approved by the county office. So our budget was approved as it was originally presented, which had, you know, all of the state aid in it that we were anticipating. We also know that we don't know what's going to happen. So, you know, we're keeping in the back of our mind that we need to have plan B if in fact, we have cuts to our state aid or something like that. And typically projects are the first things that go. Now, what we won't cut, right now, our plan is to make sure that we move ahead with our security projects. We don't want to jeopardize using any of that security grant money. So they will be the priority to move ahead with, and then other projects we're going to have to, make decisions as we go, as we have a better feel for what our financial situation is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Schultz, back to you.
I don't
So-
have any questions, and go ahead.
Nope, go ahead, Ruth.
I think that I think with that, that's everything that we had on the items to discuss. Am I correct, Mr. Sugars?
Yeah, that's all we had to discuss. The items that are on the agenda or for the work session.
Got it.
Special actions at the end.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, sorry, I just lost my place. Okay, so next I'm gonna turn it over to Mrs. Tong, although I don't think you have any items for discussion tonight.
Hold on. Yes, I do have on the HR. We have discussed about the campus police earlier, and also the CHEA negotiation. We might be doing online sometime in early May. And the last thing is we're looking for recruitment, opening positions coming along for 2020 to 2021. That's all for me.
Okay, so let me go around the room. Mr. Goodwin, any questions?
No, none for me.
Mrs. Matlack,
None, thank you.
Mrs. Schultz,
No question.
Mr. Avadia,
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Friedel,
No questions.
Mrs. Arroyo,
No questions, thank you.
and Mrs. Neary.
No questions, thank you.
Okay, next I will turn it over to you, Mrs. Neary, for P&L.
Yes, thank you. So it looks like we have 2 items for discussion this evening, so I would turn that over to Dr. Smith and the administration.
Great. Hi, everybody. So we have the first item is the, and thank you, Mrs. Neary. It's good to see everybody, even if you can't see me right now. So let me see if I can, there we go. All right. Perfect. All right. That's better. So first item is the calendar for 2020-2021, which was approved previously, but has a slight adjustment, which is to help people with more information. We've added the early dismissal days, which are for parent conferences for middle school and elementary. So that would be November 30th, December 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 2020. And the early dismissal day for high school for the PSAT day of October 14th, 2020. So those are the only changes, but we just wanted to make you all aware of that addition to the calendar. We would anticipate that for future years, we would like to try to continue to add those early dismissal dates on there as well as time goes along for other years. Any questions on that?
Great.
Okay, Mrs. Tong, any questions?
Nope.
Mrs. Matlack,
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Goodwin,
None for me.
Mrs. Neary,
None for me.
Mrs. Arroyo,
No, thank you.
Ms. Brydell?
I don't have a question about next year's calendar, but can I ask a question about this year's?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay, so yesterday was supposed to be an in-service day, and that was rescheduled. Do we have a date where that's going to happen?
We don't have a date yet, Mrs. Friedel. We're waiting to see what the governor says about a return to school. If we have the opportunity to return to school during this academic year, we decided to move the in-service day for the first day that we would come back so that staff would have a chance to transition back into the buildings before the children arrive. If they make the determination that we will not return to school this year, then the in-service day would be added at the end of the academic year.
Thank you.
And Mr. Avadia?
Nope, thanks for the explanation. Sounds good.
Okay, and I just wanted to say thank you for adding those dates to the calendar. I know over the years, parents have expressed concerns that they're not aware of those dates far in advance. So I think a lot of people will be very appreciative that that information is now being included. So thank you for that.
And he's got one more item.
Okay, and Mr. Schultz, I believe we have one more item on, or Mrs. Neary, I believe we have one more item on your agenda.
Yes, I think it is the student activity fee. This is the annual discussion, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah. So per our policy, we should revisit it annually before the coming school year. So that should be around this time. And the last year when we went over it, we looked at other districts' fees, where we are in relation to theirs. Our fee is so $80 if you most of you are aware, but $80 per student for high school and $70 per student for middle school. And there is a $150 family cap total. That is a lower fee than in most districts, but if I recall from last year, our discussion is we really felt like just given everything going on that it was not worth increasing that fee, given the amount of extra that we brought in would not be worth the hardship that it would create. That's my recollection from last year's discussion, and I'm not sure where we all stand this year, but if anyone has any thoughts on that.
Mrs. Neary?
Yeah, I definitely, obviously, especially given the current climate, would not want to increase. I am concerned, given the current economic environment, the impacts to families for next year and the ability to cover those fees and what waiving those fees in that process look like for a large number of our families.
Well, there's a process already in place today, correct?
There is.
It would just be potentially on a greater scale.
So we track, it's a good question, Mrs. Neary and Mrs. Seidel. We track it right now. Any child that qualifies for free or reduced meals is automatically waived for the student activity fee. And just a reminder, the student activity fee, families are responsible for that if a child participates in a school activity for which a stipend is paid to a staff member. So that's athletics, and then it's a handful of activities, clubs and events at the middle school and high school level. Then there's a process through which if families do not qualify for free and reduced meals, through discussion with the principal has discretion to waive the fee for families as well. Mr. Barrow, who's the director of athletics for the district, works with folks at all 5 of the secondary schools and with Dr. Smith to maintain a list so we track what those numbers look like during the course of the year. But that's a good question, something certainly that we would be cognizant of going into the fall.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Mrs. Arroyo?
No, thank you. Ms. Neary covered my question.
Ms. Friedel?
I'm in agreement with what Mrs. Neary stated.
Thank you. Mr. Avadia?
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I wonder, what do we take in annually from this fee?
Estimate.
Mrs. Ridgway? She's muted. Can you unmute
I
her?
can unmute her. Yeah. Appreciate it.
Hello, we budget 500,000 for that.
And is that about what we get, we receive?
I would say we receive a little bit under that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
That was the voice of Lisa Ridgway, who's our Assistant Business Administrator and Deputy Board Secretary.
Okay, I appreciate it. It just helps sort of color for me what amount we're talking about. All right, I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. And just a reminder for everybody too, the student activity fee monies that are collected go into the general fund. It's a source of general revenue for the district. They are not earmarked for specific sports or specific clubs or anything like that. It's revenue, something that was created throughout the state in response to the budget crisis of more than 10 years ago. Sorry, Ms.
That's okay. Mrs. Tong?
Nope.
Mrs. Schultz?
I would also agree at this time. I don't see the need to raise them. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Matlack?
I'm in agreement as well. I see no need to address, an increase in the fees. And I'd like to just point out that there's nothing in the policy that would prevent us from reevaluating this mid-year as well, given the current circumstances and not.
Oh, hold on, Mrs. Matlack, we lost you all of a sudden. You got muted. Okay. There you go. Now we can hear you.
Okay. And not knowing, what the future holds, we can certainly revisit this mid-year or even before that, if we decide that, even the current level is something that we need to readdress, for our families, if that is a struggle or a concern. So even though we are, addressing it now, because that's what the policy says, there's nothing to prevent us from readdressing it before this time next year.
Great, thank you for that reminder. And Mr. Goodwin?
I agree that we should leave it as is in terms of the current amount, and I think that was a great point that Ms. Matlack brought up. So, but I do agree that we should leave it the same.
Great, thank you. And I also am in agreement of leaving it as is, and I also appreciate the comments about needing to take a look at this in the future based on the continued impact of COVID-19 on our community. So thank you, Mrs. Matlack, for that reminder that we have, other opportunities to take a look at this in the near future. Okay, so that moves us into strategic planning, and we are going to talk a bit about the implementation strategy and timeline that we referred to last time we all met and talked a little bit about our next steps with our strategic plan. So I'm going to turn it over to, is it Dr. Mosh or Mr. Sugars? Are you going to go through this?
We're actually both going to do a little bit.
Okay.
I'll start a little bit and then let Mrs. Sugars go into the details with where we are. So we redistributed the documents that we shared with the board last September. I put them in the memo, I believe, on the 3rd of April. Both the public document and the one that goes in a little bit more detail, with for the board. So Mrs. Sugars will go through and talk a little bit about that. So I want to remind everybody that we do have our strategic planning action committees, which are made up of staff members, have been meeting. Even though that we are, working remotely, the folks have been getting together. I just want to remind everybody of what those 3 goals are that were developed throughout the process, that took in all the information. Remember, they originally started with the ad hoc committee a year ago that was meeting, And then with the work that Judy Wilson helped to facilitate with us, the community surveys, all of the in-person meetings and focus groups that she did with students and staff members and community members. And then the 2 days, January 14th and 15th, that a group of 27 people spent here in the boardroom coming up with what these goals are. So the three goals are, and they all start with the same terms: building upon our strong foundations of academic excellence, inclusion, voice, and cultural proficiency. We will create frameworks of learning and supports for all students to develop the skills needed for social and emotional wellness. We will develop highly engaging learner-centered experiences within an environment that promotes voice, choice, and a passion for learning. And we will provide resources, opportunities, and experiences for our students to connect to the world beyond their classrooms and to become informed and empathetic agents of change in the world. So those are the three goals that the board adopted this winter that will carry us through the next 5 years. I think they are phenomenal goals. We are already starting to see the impact and the work that we are doing with the remote learning, with our continuity of learning plan that's been implemented since the 16th of March, and what the impact is in terms of what we are doing, who we are as a school district, and what has taken place. Before I turn it over to Mrs. Sugars, I do want to say that one of the predominant questions that I've heard from folks over the course of the last month, beyond do you think we'll be back in school this year, which I don't have an answer to, has been, as we have spent so much time talking about a referendum, do I think that what we're going through right now is going to impact us in the referendum? And my answer to that is very clear, and it's absolutely yes. That what we are experiencing, what we have experienced during the last month, what we will continue to experience during the next couple of months through the end of the academic year, absolutely is going to have an impact on our planning of a referendum. We need to have a referendum in the school district. There's work that must be done that's impacting us on a regular basis. But what we are currently experiencing absolutely is going to impact our time frame and what our guidelines have been with what we initially set out for ourselves. So I'm going to ask Mrs. Sugars to go through. Again, board members, this was in your confidential folder with the information that we sent through.
So when we initially put this timeline together, we broke it down into phases, and phase one, which was really sort of the homework phase, where we were going to do some of the things like our strategic plan. We were going to develop some additional committees. We were going to start to get some information out to the public. Fortunately, with phase one, we have either completed or are in the process of working with all of the phases, all of the steps that were in that phase. Biggest piece, I think, was the development of our strategic plan. We have developed our alternative funding and safety and security committees. They have met. We're going to have our final meetings with them next week,
Next Tuesday.
and hope that we can finalize our recommendations to the board. Our security plan should follow after we finalize our conversations with the Safety and Security Committee. We had our demographic study done. We didn't get to the next phase where we would take a look at, if we were going to talk about redistricting or shutting down a school or adding to schools or new construction versus rehabilitation was a big question that was in the last referendum. So that would have been the next step in the demographic study. We did not get to that piece yet. We did get out some information, some district information in our publication in November, which included some financial information. And then we have developed a multi-year maintenance plan. We're still waiting on the finalization of what we've been calling the user-friendly long-range facilities plan, kind of a condensed version of the original plan. We don't have that yet. We're hoping to have that soon. Then we can marry those two documents together and kind of give a comprehensive plan for that. If we go into phase two of the timeline, that's where we really got into disseminating information, developing plans, having people in the schools, talking about the issues, identifying what projects we're going to do, having lots of informational type sessions, and really, kind of the promotion of what needs to be done in the buildings, why we're doing it certain ways, and getting people in the buildings and able to see what needs to be done. We had hoped to have the project applications done by September because we wanted to make sure that the state had ample time to review them so we don't run into the same issues that we did last time. And at this point, I think it's going to be very difficult to have those applications done by September for a March bond referendum. Phase 3 then was again the all-out informational campaign so that people could get the information that they needed. And obviously that can't happen until after we go through the second phase. The last phase, which was the ongoing phase, which was applying for alternative funding sources, maximizing public and private partnerships, activating alumni association. I think a lot of that's going to come through the recommendations of the alternative funding committee because those are a lot of the things that we have talked about in that committee. And then the last one, which was a regular survey of faculty. I think that will probably come out of the strategic planning process that we've gone through. So those things will happen at some point, but the kind of the meat and potatoes of getting the bond referendum ready, getting it out there and getting the information out there, I think is the piece that we're going to struggle with given, the situation that we're in right now.
So knowing that, finalizing the project apps by September 2020 is a stretch and not.
I'm going to tell you that
it's not doable.
It's not possible.
Right. So do we start having the conversation now about what those new dates are, or do we need to wait until we see what happens with when we're all back in the buildings? Like, is everything dependent on finding out when administration can get back to work in their offices?
So it's not just it's us being in the building and folks being in the schools, which is a huge piece of it. Again, I don't think it's possible. I'm going to say that it's not possible to have project applications done realistically for a referendum for this September to go out in March.
Okay.
I think the next level of question is if and when we are able to return to school, what does society look like, right? What guidelines, are put into place before there's a level of functionality with bringing people in, holding meetings, bringing people together in groups that is going to impact what it is that we can do and with what speed to go through. As we talked about, last summer and in September when we rolled out this initial plan, we knew that a year to have those project applications done was going to have us on a tight timeline. Mm-hmm. It's just not physically possible, for the professionals that we need to be involved and for the board to have deliberation and discussion, and truly in a meaningful sense that engages community, about what those steps are in a way that can get us to September of 2020. But I'd be hesitant, honestly, right now, Ms. Seidel, to say that I think we should plan for the April date, of next year, or the June date, or there's 5 dates in the year that the state tells us, that we can do it until we know when we're going to be back into a regular level of functionality.
Okay, that's fair enough, and obviously we're still moving forward with things like the committees, the alternative funding committee, the safety and security committee. So all of that's still happening. Is there anything I know phase 2 is sort of the meat and potatoes that's kind of on hold, but is there anything in phase 3 that, I guess my question is there anything that we can still be working on so that when we do pick that date, that we're not behind on some of these other things and that maybe we're actually ahead of the game with some of the other less meat and potato items?
There's absolutely work that I believe and from talking with Linda, I think is going on right now. As the board, we made the determination was made to go with a new architectural firm, at Garrison. So it actually provides them with a substantial time right now for them to be going through all of the documents and familiarizing themselves with the buildings and the work and what the plan was, what our project applications were when we put them through, for the December 2008 referendum. So there's tremendous value in that. There's so much of what goes through, in phase 3 that involves the active engagement with people about what the projects are. We will continue to talk about the work. I mean, there is so much of the work that what had to be done, what we said was priority to be done in 2018, work still has to be done in the building, right? The roofs are the roofs, the HVAC work is the HVAC work. That just has not taken place. So there's a certain piece that we can talk about it. I think that there's a part right now with the work that, and I continue to say in the messages that we put out, that I'm so thankful for the staff that we have and for the community in which we live, what people are dealing with right now, in response to the situation the country is currently in, that there's not a whole lot more that I think we necessarily want to be forcing a conversation to go through. There's just a level of, I don't know that it's the right discussion for taking place. People know that that's what's there, but I don't think that we're in a place that we need to be maintaining that same level of intensity with pushing that out.
Okay. Okay, Mrs. Schultz, do you have any comments or questions?
I don't at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Matlack?
None at this time. Thank you.
Mr. Goodwin?
Just one quick question. I thought that in the budget we had planned to have a grant writer. Is that true or no?
Yes, we have money in the budget as a contracted service to contract with somebody from the outside. As we initially start with that. So yes, there is.
Okay. Yeah, because I don't think that was. I think that is part of the ongoing. That was one of the accomplishments under the ongoing piece, I thought.
Yes. Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you. Mrs. Neary?
None for me, thank you.
Mrs. Arroyo?
No, thank you.
Ms. Friedel?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Avadia?
Yes, I guess just at this point, I appreciate the discussion. I think a lot of good points being made. It does seem that, I think initially we did talk about how tight a timeline it was, and surely we've been thrown for a loop that pushes us over a certain threshold. My question is, so safety and security and alternative funding sort of prepare some recommendations and present to the board, I think, in June, and I think we're keeping that timeline. I guess my question is, from that point, do those two functions get absorbed by the board, and we'll bring in some experts to kind of inform us on different options that are recommended? How does that offboarding and onboarding onto the board look like when we get to that recommendation stage in June?
Yes, good question, Mr. Avadia. So those two committees we expect, right now we're planning for them at the action meeting in May, I believe, to make presentation of the recommendations to the board. Mrs. Sugars and I will meet with them. One committee is on Tuesday next week on the 21st, and the other one is on the 23rd. And then we'll put the recommendations together, have them present them to the board. Once they present them to the board will then take those recommendations and then absorb them into the work of the board. You've had community folks, and there's been board members who have served as members of each of those committees that will then act as the liaison that can, as well as Lynn as I can, talk about what the experience was and what the recommendations mean. As we finish up in June and get into July, the board, is tasked with creating goals for themselves for next year. And then those recommendations will then tie in with the work that's being done in the development of the goal. But it becomes the work of the board at that point.
Okay,
any follow-ups, Mr. Avadia? Did that answer your question?
It does. Yes, thank you.
Okay. And Mrs. Tom, any questions or comments?
Nope. Thank you.
Okay. All right, well, that brings us into our special action agenda. There are no C&I items on the agenda for tonight, so I will ask Mrs. Schultz to move B and F.
So the superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, approval of the bill list. Number 2, resolution. Number 3, resolution for the award of change orders. Number 4, resolution approving transfer of funds to allow for funding of construction project East Masonry Wall. And number 5, resolution for the award of change orders. Do I have a second?
Yes. I second.
Okay.
Can I have a little bit more clarification on I?
Eric Goodwin.
For this? Okay, Mr. Goodwin, thank you. Are there any questions?
you want to run through questions?
I'll run through the names, and I
Okay.
apologize. The plan was I was going to read the agenda and then turn it over to the chair for a second. So
No
I'm
problem.
sorry. Still
Yep.
getting used to this
That's
new
okay.
format.
Yep, no
Okay,
problem.
so
Thank
Mrs. Tong, any questions?
Nope.
Mrs. Neary,
No.
Mrs. Arroyo,
No, thank you.
Mrs. Matlack,
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Friedel,
No, thank you.
Mr. Goodwin,
No questions, thank you.
and Mr. Avadia.
No questions, thank you.
Okay, seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
All right, I'm going to open up the online voting for everyone. And then I will go through the list and see if anybody has any abstentions or anything that needs to be noted. Mrs. Arroyo and Mrs. Tong. I can fill it in for you if you'd like.
Oh, done, thank
You
you.
might have to, I don't know.
Okay, I'll put you down as a yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to close the online voting, and then I will read through if there's any abstentions or changes. Mrs. Arroyo,
No abstentions. Yes.
Friedel,
No abstentions.
Mr. Goodwin,
No, I mean, I don't have any changes.
Mrs. Matlack,
No abstentions.
Mrs. Neary,
None for me, thank you.
Mr. Avadia,
None for me, thanks.
Mrs. Schultz,
None, thank you.
Mrs. Tong,
Nope, thank you.
Mrs. Seidel.
None, thank you.
Ready to move on?
Okay, all right, and this time I'll do it the way that we agreed to doing it. So the superintendent recommends and I move the following. Number 1, termination of employment certificated. Number 2, termination of employment non-certificated. Number 3, appointments certificated. Number 4, appointments non-certificated. Number 5, assignment salary change certificated. And Mrs. Tong, can I please have a second?
Yes, you may have second.
Okay, great. Mr. Avadia, any questions?
None, thank you.
Mr. Goodwin,
None.
Mrs. Matlack,
No questions.
Ms. Friedel,
I do have a question. So on the appointment certificated, it looks like they are for co-curricular and some different Mount Misery and some different things. Now, in the event that school does not reopen this year, do these get paid or these are per hour? So the assistant coach, boys, girls, and track.
So
Will
the
that be-
track, yes, the track position was inadvertently left off in an earlier meeting in appointments that were made. So the person had already assumed that responsibility. We are continuing to pay all of our staff members, including the stipends. The Mount Misery positions, we had groups from Carusi who were scheduled to attend Mount Misery since we have been closed. We initially rescheduled those dates for late in May. The people that are being approved for Mount Misery are the staff members, the retired staff members, and nursing staff members who are outside of the district employees who go down and staff Mount Misery. They were approved earlier in the year and are being reapproved because there's a change in the end date for when they would be performing those services. The Information Literacy Project Curriculum Committee is something that continues to meet, and they have been meeting remotely. And then we approve staff, same thing with ESY, and the summer IEP meetings is a traditional thing that we go through.
Okay, so to circle back to Mount Misery, the
Yes.
retired staff, if the trip doesn't happen, and trust me, I'm well aware of the trip, they won't get paid?
That's correct.
They only, okay, thank
They
you.
would have to work those dates and submit a timesheet in order to be paid.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Friedel. Mrs. Arroyo
No, thank you.
and Mrs. Schultz? Did I already?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
No, sorry, I lost my place. And Mrs. Neary, I don't know if I asked you already or not.
No, thank you. I'm good.
Okay. Did I miss anybody?
Nope.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, we're going to open online voting. Okay, it appears as though the vote is unanimous. I will check for any abstentions. Mrs. Arroyo. Mrs. Arroyo, any abstentions on the HR agenda?
No abstentions.
Ms. Friedel?
No, thank you.
Mr. Goodwin?
No abstentions.
Mrs. Matlack?
No abstentions.
Mrs. Neary?
None, thank you.
Mr. Vadia?
None, thanks.
Mrs. Schultz?
None, thank you.
Mrs. Tong?
No, thank you.
Mrs. Seidel?
No, thank you.
Okay, the motion carries.
Terrific, thank you. And next for policy and legislation, the superintendent recommends and I move the following. Number 1, resolution. Number 2, approval of harassment, intimidation, bullying, investigation decisions. And Mrs. Neary, do I have a second?
Yes.
Thank you. Any questions, Mrs. Neary?
None.
Okay, Mr. Goodwin?
No questions.
Mrs. Tong?
Nope.
Mr. Avadia?
No questions, thank you.
Mrs. Schultz?
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Friedel?
No questions, thank you.
Mrs. Matlack?
No questions, thank you.
And Mrs. Arroyo?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Sugars?
All right, I'm going to open the online voting. Okay, it appears as though we have a unanimous vote. Do we have any, let's check for abstentions on any of these items? Mrs. Arroyo?
No.
Ms. Friedel?
No, thank you.
Mr. Goodwin?
None.
Mrs. Matlack?
I have none, thank you.
Neary?
None, thank you.
Mr. Avadia?
None, thank you.
Mrs. Schultz?
I have none, thank you.
Mrs. Tong?
Nope, thank you.
Mrs. Seidel?
No, thank you.
Motion carries.
Okay, so that takes us into our second public comment. And again, these are topics on items on any topic, and they were sent to Mrs. Sugars in advance of the meeting. You still have a few minutes to get your comment in by emailing lshugars@chclc.org. And I will turn it over to Mrs. Sugars to read the public commentary.
Okay, I'm going to read these in the order they were received. I'm going to start with Mrs. Dana Pilla. She's at 56 Curtis Avenue. She has a child at the elementary school and the middle school. Apart from being a parent, I am a longtime educator, current college professor, and K-12 professional development provider and online course development consultant. I speak both as a parent and educator when voicing my current viewpoints. As the elementary school has transitioned to remote learning, I have questions about the overall district implementations for the K-12 model. I do understand what is happening at the middle school would be quite different than what is happening at the elementary school for various reasons. The middle school has been using Google Classroom as their LMS since September. The children and teachers are familiar with the platform for learning and assessment, so the transition to remote learning was practically seamless. My concern is how Google Classroom is being implemented at my younger daughter's elementary school, specifically in the first grade. The first grade team posts their work as a team available to all first grade children. While there's a daily message from at least one first grade teacher, I do not see daily or weekly assignment feedback. Some parents see the feedback, others do not. The teachers address the whole group, which consists of more than 100 students. What is the expectation for teachers to provide feedback to children on assignments submitted? How often will feedback be submitted? Will the children be graded on the 1 through 4 rubric? Greatest concern I have is the lack of live interaction with the teacher and class on Zoom or other related live streaming services such as Google Meetup or Google Hangouts. Children need that emotional connection during this difficult time, and so far there's been no live interaction at the elementary level. Does Cherry Hill have a plan to institute a daily or weekly 20-minute live video check-in or morning meeting from their classroom teacher, or where there will be daily or weekly open office hours for parents or children to schedule live video time with their classroom teachers should they have a question? As a parent, I would find value in seeing my child connect emotionally to her teacher a few times a week, even to her classmates by sharing the morning meeting or other simple interactive activity. As an educator who specializes in online instruction, I understand the difficult situation the district's in. It's impossible to transition to an online platform in 3 days. I respect and cherish my daughter's teachers and I'm happy with the education you're receiving in Cherry Hill. In the event that New Jersey continues remote learning through the end of the school year, I would like to know if the schedule for communication and live meeting lessons with teachers can be created at each school so we can feel more connected and our children can have the opportunity to see and interact with their teachers live instead of solely by video or mostly in writing. Okay, our second comment is from Heather Leibowitz, and Heather lives at 1223 Sequoia Road. With becoming aware of the school board meeting tonight and seeing that you are the contact to send my comments, I would like to include my thoughts on the plan Cherry Hill has implemented. I have a junior in high school East and an 8th grader at Beck. The bar has been set low for these students, for high school students. To only be given work to hand in twice a week is ridiculous. These students should be having interactive learning experiences. Today's technology makes this possible, as is evident by other districts in both New Jersey and elsewhere. Our students are supposed to be in a top performing district. So where is the instruction? Why is the administration not providing consistent instruction to the teachers to provide daily interactive learning? Dr. Malash believes a call-in question period is sufficient for this, but based on the material provided, if the student doesn't have questions, there is no need to use that time. Bottom line, instruction needs to step up. Beck Middle School has integrated interactive learning a little better. Some teachers are regularly coordinating Zoom classes. Others are providing video instruction. These students need to be prepared for what's to come, and next year's teachers are going to need to recreate their curriculum to compensate for what is sliding between the cracks. Otherwise, Cherry Hill students are going to be woefully behind their peers. She'd also like to know if there's been collaboration with other high-performing districts. The next one is from Carly Meyer. Don't have an address for Mrs. Meyer. I wanted to say that Mrs. Boyle at Woodcrest Elementary School has been phenomenal and is going above and beyond for her kids. She deserves recognition. Conversely, the 5th grade e-learning has been an unacceptable disappointment with almost no personal contact, no feedback on assignments from teachers, no lessons made by Woodcrest as teacher, but just links to sites. My son is done in under an hour. Today, his assignment was a math website and to read for 30 minutes. Compared to other schools, even within the district, it has not been good. Ms. McGallany in kindergarten has been great. The 1st grade team seems like they are trying. Some more personal contact with the kids would be nice. The next comment is from Ilana Yaris at 329 Cherry Hill Boulevard. Thank you for the continued hard work the teachers and administrators are putting into to continue to educate our children while they are distance learning at home. As my family continues to celebrate Passover, the holiday of freedom, I am reminded of all the freedoms we are currently sacrificing for the better of the community and our society as a whole. I do want to point out that there is a list of holidays put out every spring as sanctioned days off and considered excused absences from school by the state of New Jersey. The list for the 1920 school year can be found at this particular website. I know that following this list of holidays to try not to schedule meetings and events on it can be difficult. However, it needs to start at the top. You're having a school board meeting right now on one of those holidays that is sanctioned as a day off. There are other committees within the school district who will be holding a meeting tomorrow. And at the beginning of the year, I had to explain why the science fair for my children's elementary school could not take place when originally scheduled because it was a Jewish holiday. I do understand that we cannot cater to everyone, but when people are excluded because of their religious observance, it will make them feel left out, excluded, and alone. Please ask of you in the future to look at the list of holidays according to the state of New Jersey as to not schedule meetings during the week that could be in conflict. It starts at the top. If the BOE cannot be bothered to check the calendar when scheduling meetings, how can we expect anyone else in the district to be culturally aware of these conflicts? Additional. I have another comment from Dr. Potowitz. He is disappointed that there was no discussion concerning the resolution by the board and administration. Please discuss the bill itself that the school board and admin. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Malosh, do you have any comments to any of the public comments?
I do.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Seidel. So a couple of things. Part of the reason that the 82% was included in the resolution that the board adopted tonight is because it is such a significant number and such a significant percentage of the money that we use to fund the school district that comes from the local tax levy is why that number was included in there. And it came as part of the recommendation from New Jersey school boards, is why we put it through. I thank the other parents for their comments about the experiences in the school. I want to start by saying, and I mentioned a little bit just briefly earlier, how grateful I am to the staff and the work that the staff has been doing, over the course of the last month. It's the expectation of what we put on our administrators and our certificated staff members to make such a transition in such a quick turnaround, I think was huge. In terms of the work that we asked them to do. I'm incredibly grateful for what they have done, and it is an evolving experience about what's gone on. If you remember that continuity of learning plan, the first 2 weeks, the expectation when we closed school for those 2 weeks and implemented that plan was for a review, really not for introduction of a lot of new material, except for the AP level classes of the high school because they're being assessed by an outside tool with the AP exams that come up in May. And then as we have moved forward and begin this week and with the new marking period and new materials, it is the introduction of new materials. We are not in a place as a school district where we are prepared for synchronous teaching and learning at all of the grade levels, kindergarten or pre-K up through the high school. Our staff is not ready to deliver it. Our students are not all ready to receive it. Is a primary hurdle that we are just not at that place yet to be able to do it. Our expectation in the continuity of learning plan is that all of our teachers are using Google Classroom. There's provision of communication tools that exist in Google Classroom. Many of our staff members have gone beyond just the Google Classroom. They've used the Google Meet. Some are using Zoom, some are using Screencast, some are using Flipgrid. There are a lot of different tools that are being employed and implemented. I would tell any parent the first place always to start if you have a question is with that classroom teacher. Again, some incredibly dedicated folks that we have that work for us in the school district, but start with them. If there's something that you need, if there's something that you want to see more of, or something you want to see different, start with that classroom teacher, go to the building principal, always start that communication. You can certainly always contact us directly. The parents that sent those specific questions in the comments tonight, I'll make sure that somebody from the school follows up with you directly so that we can discuss specific concerns that may exist about your children's experience. Mrs. Yaris, thank you for going over. We did, have a discussion briefly at one point about Passover and the end of Passover. We do try to be as inclusive as we possibly can as we look at our schedule. We look at the events, that are taking place. We'll certainly include that as we look to build our calendars for next year as well. I appreciate the folks that, as we are looking at the screen, it shows us that there are 30 attendees. So 30 folks outside of the people that are logged into the meeting that are viewing on the outside, which is great. Then we have people that are continuing to participate. And again, the big thing that I continue to ask of everybody is thank the teachers for the work that they are doing. I thank all of the parents. This normal that we are experiencing. I am thankful that my children are older. They are self-regulatory for the most part in terms of their learning right now. I know the challenges that our parents are experiencing, trying to be the supports for multiple children at different grade levels at the same time at home. So I'm very thankful for all that you are doing. Continue, please, to practice your compassionate spacing. Please continue to follow the directions that are placed out there. And again, the more that we can do to champion one another and to support one another and to maintain regular levels of communication, the more successful we can continue to be. So I thank all of you for that.
Thank you, Dr. Malash. And that brings us to the end of our meeting. So I will make a motion to adjourn. And could I please have a second? Mrs. Neary?
Second.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, second.
Several seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Okay, the motion carries. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Stay safe. Have a great night.